There was one guy who had patented edible underwear. The seniors were not paying their juniors at all. As a son or as a daughter, if you join your, let's say, dad's practice or mom's practice, the learning happens only when you join the practice and maybe a few years later.
Hello BO family and welcome to the 6th episode of the Barely Opinionated show. In this one, we have Abhishek, who's been a lawyer for the past 17 years with his own legal firm called Pulastya Legal. In this one, we dive into India's judicial system. Is it really efficient, and how and why should someone get into the industry? He shares a lot of insights into the legalities of some of the day-to-day things that we do and shares some of the weirdest cases that he's had to tackle. He also breaks down a bunch of famous cases for us, one of them being the 2611 Ajmal Kasab case. But before we go ahead, don't forget to like this video because it helps with the algorithm, and subscribe to our channel for more such content. So strap in and let's dive in. Hi Abhishek.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Very well.
Feeling comfortable?
Okay, yes.
You feel a little uncomfortable right now.
It's new to me, so it's okay.
Okay, so we're going to start with a rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay. First question is, what is the one part you hate about being a lawyer?
So mostly there are all the good parts. I love being a lawyer. Wow. I think the only part that I hate is people only call you when they need you.
Aww.
They don't generally call you and say, hey, how are you doing? How was your Saturday? How was your Sunday? Believe it or not, today I received a call from one of my friends who goes back to grade 10.
Okay.
We studied together in grade 10th, and he called me today and he's like, hi, how are you? Kya chal raha hai? Kaise ho? And all that. How's family? Listen, I have a question for you. And there it goes. So mostly there are all good parts, but I think it feels a little odd sometimes when
It's very transactional?
Yes.
It's very transactional?
Yes, yeah.
I think that's with every business, even for us.
Yeah, I think they only when they need you for something, then they call you.
Right.
Otherwise, they don't say, "Chalo, let's have a let's go out for lunch or dinner or something like that."
Right.
So it's slightly on that basis, but apart from that,
Interesting.
It's the nature of.
Okay, so being a copyrights and IP lawyer mainly,
Yeah.
if you could patent one ridiculous invention, which one would it be?
There have been a lot of inventions which are really ridiculous. And when I was doing my master's in the US, that's when I really was exposed to these. There was one guy who had patented edible underwear.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa.
There was one guy who had invented that. There was one guy who had invented a big wooden block which has to be kept on your head, and you can put beer in it. And whenever you are feeling thirsty, there is a pipe that comes to you, and then you can just have beer on the go. All sorts of weird inventions. I think US is a diverse market, and people have a lot of crazy ideas there.
Really? India doesn't happen like that?
India, I mean, I'm sure, but I've not come across
anything that weird.
Many weird ones. Because I think mostly they get eliminated during the counseling stage.
Okay.
Mostly they get eliminated, especially in our case. I usually discourage them if the idea is not useful or if it's way too crazy. Or sometimes people come into the zones of being immoral and all those things. So that's where I think our lawyers do a good job in kind of shutting them down at the initial stage. But back there are really some crazy ones that I came across.
Okay. If you could own the copyrights to any song, which one would it be?
Songs. Okay. I'm going to copyright a couple of ghazals. So I'm a slightly old school that way. I don't know if you've heard this ghazal called Ranjish Hi Sahi. It's a really old ghazal. I would like to copyright that because that's my go-to thing for if I have to pep up my mood or if I just have to be in my zone. That's like kind of my thing. I would also copyright Mitwa.
That's a beautiful song.
It's a song that reminds me of my the then girlfriend and now wife. So I would like to copyright that. Yeah.
Wow, how beautiful.
Yeah.
Guys, if you have, which song would you want to copyright? Tell us in the comment section. Okay. Fourth question. What is the one law in India that you want to change?
So I think, Rohit, laws are fine, and you're asking a lawyer. So laws are mostly okay.
Okay.
I think the problem is the execution part of it.
Interesting.
We've got really comprehensive legal system, and I think the current government is also doing a good job in throwing away the older ones and bringing the new laws. And I'm reasonably okay with the existing legal setup. I would still like to see some more better implementation of laws around corruption. I think that is something like a termite that really breaks down our systems. If we can do something, and mind you, there are laws. There are anti-corruption laws in India as well. But if we can somehow implement them in a much more practical manner and make it more accountable, and I think somewhere if the citizens also feel that corruption is not okay, if we can do somewhere around that, I think that is
So
something.
it's not the change of law, but it's the change of implementation.
I think so, yeah. I think because our legal system is generally very comprehensive, and I've studied in the US, so I know this, and I work with clients across the globe. Our legal system is I'm proud of it. But the implementation part is where I think we can do a better job always.
Interesting. Okay. Last question. If you could be on the general counsel of a startup, or if you could defend a startup, a controversial startup, which one would it be?
Okay.
Or controversial celebrity?
Wow. I think somebody who has a big mouth, somebody who is really...
Okay, would you be interested in, say, defending Kangana Ranaut?
I mean, why not? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah?
why not? Yeah. As long as, see, my job is to represent my client, and which is what I do anyway. Somebody like her gives you a lot of meat to play around and to make sure that you defend her.
And of course, business-wise, these are high-paying clients also.
Yeah, I mean that too. Fine, yeah, that too.
It's always business. Come on.
That too, yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's the end of our rapid fire segment. Let's jump into the meat of the podcast.
Sure. Thank you.
So, Abhishek, what has your journey been? You have been practicing law for 17 and a half years now?
Yeah.
Yeah. How has the law system in India changed from when you were starting out to now?
Yeah. So when I was studying law, so there are certain laws that everybody has to go through.
Right.
So, for example, basics of criminal law, basics of civil law, the criminal procedure, the evidence. Those are some of the things that you always have to study, and that's what we did in law school. I think anybody who's planning to do law will eventually have to go through all these legal processes and legal subjects. There is a certain section of laws that were pretty much not there, like privacy.
Okay.
I remember was not really that big of a deal back in the day, and I think it's also because of the advent of internet.
Correct.
I think that was not there. I think the whole change in intellectual property and information technology that internet has brought in is something that was not there. So it has definitely changed. I think laws around AI has completely taken over. Like there are still a lot of unanswered questions which were not even questions back in the day, because traditionally, if there is an author, he writes a book, you get a copyright. If somebody violates, done. But now the question is, who is the author in case of content which is created by ChatGPT, right? So there are a lot of unanswered questions, is what I'm trying to say. But I think, it has changed. And I think law follows the society. So as the society keeps changing, law has to keep changing. Law has to keep evolving.
Right.
So it basically follows the society, if I may say so, because laws is ultimately rules of human conduct. They are basically set of rules to define what humans as a unit and individually, in person and in private, are supposed to do.
Correct.
So as the behavior changes,
the law keep
changes.
Changing. Interesting. I want to touch upon one point that you mentioned, which is AI, right?
Yeah.
AI is a big threat right now for everyone.
Yeah.
First question is AI a threat to lawyers by any chance?
No. If you ask me, no.
Okay.
And we've done our research. So at my firm, a lot of people have this, like a lot of the junior associates and even the interns have this question that, is it going to take over our jobs? Are we in threat and all that? We did some internal analysis, and I don't think our jobs are in danger. At least lawyers are here to stay. It can be assisting the lawyers. It can easily assist the lawyers in creating.
Like, for example, writing the legal documents and stuff. I'm guessing that will be easier, and I'm saying the starting out positions,
Correct.
like writing.
Correct.
I'm guessing there are positions.
So believe it or not, no.
No?
That's not what I have felt.
Okay.
And of course, somebody may have a different opinion about it. But I feel, legal documents and legal deeds are basically customized to the needs of a client. Like you can templatize it to a certain extent.
Right.
Like you can templatize the initial part of it. Like this agreement is executed between party A, party B. That language can be templatized.
Okay.
But then the meat. What is the meat of the agreement? The meat of the agreement is the terms and conditions.
Okay.
That cannot be templatized because every agreement, every party, every negotiation, every deal is different. So I think, okay, if I still have to answer your question, I think 20-25% is something that you can use AI for. But the rest of it, where your analysis is required, where the meat, like I said, of the discussion is that something.
At the end of it, AI can't go and fight in the court.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That too. It can help you prepare documents,
Right.
but it won't replace.
Correct.
The fact, or I think the human element. So again, one of the things that we do at our firm is whenever I'm conducting a client meeting, the human element, the human touch, or the behavior, the way you respond to a particular client, the way you make him or her feel that you are listening to them and you're there to answer their questions. That's not.
True.
I don't think that's going to be replaced by AI or by robotics or anything like that.
True.
So I think lawyers are fine, at least for the next couple of decades.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how have laws changed, or like what are lawyers or the judicial system, how is it changing based on AIs, how the newer AIs are coming and how they're being
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of software that is leveraging AI to do a lot of things, which is definitely helping. And even at our firm, what we do is we have a software that leverages AI to compare, let's say, two brand names, if they are similar or not similar. So if I have a brand name called Karan, is Karan similar to Karen? Now, back in the day, I would sit next to a file and I would say, I would review the entire document, review the entire case, and see if it's similar or not. But AI, and again, only to a certain extent, we've been able to achieve some sort of formula where it can compare it for you and give it to you in a report saying, I think this is similar. Do you approve or not approve?
Right.
So again, the human element is still there, but a lot of good amount of work is
a lot of I'm guessing a lot of research work, a lot of just getting the ideas is what AI is.
A lot of dirty work, if I may call it.
Yeah.
Not that it is dirty, but a lot of the hard work is. From hard work, it has turned to smart work. I think that's what AI has done for us, the lawyers. I think it has turned hard work into smart work.
Got it. So, I think our generation and maybe a little older generation to me, I think we have been influenced by different shows. And we have been influenced by different shows in terms of the perception of how a lawyer is. Right? One being Harvey Spector. Right. What are your thoughts on that show, and how do you think that has changed the law industry in general?
So I get that a lot. In fact, I don't know if it's a happy thing or not. A couple of my clients have saved my number in their mobile phone as Harvey Spector.
Whoa.
So it's kind of a cool thing to be. It's obviously a show. It's a fictional show.
Right.
They've taken elements of reality. They've taken the fact that there is a law firm, there is a lawyer. But if you ask me as a lawyer, there is no Mike Ross that you can hire in a law firm. It's illegal from day one.
Got it.
You can't hire a fraud in a law firm. You'll be disbarred. You're licensed to practice law.
Right.
You can forget about that. You can't. I remember seeing this long time ago. There was an episode where he's blackmailing a judge or something.
Right.
You can't do that. That's fiction.
Okay.
I think what people like is the show-off side of it. The fact that he dresses up. He can charm a client. That's okay.
Do you also have like a cupboard filled with 50 different suits in like different colors?
So, okay, that's a trade secret, but I'm going to let out. There is a science behind how I dress up. Again, I'm not sure if it's the lawyer's thing or not, but there is a science behind how I dress up.
Okay.
I know what my clients like. I know enough about them to charm them to a certain extent. But ultimately, see, dressing up is just a portion of it.
But I feel body language plays an important role, and dressing is part of it.
I do have 50 plus ties that I wear occasionally if I have to. I've got different types of pocket squares. I've got different suits, different shoes, my brogue shoes, my pattern shoes. There are different types of shoes. But what I'm trying to say is ultimately as a lawyer, what matters is what you communicate with the client, what you can do for the client, how far you can go to serve the client. So yeah, all that show-show part is good, and I'm up for it. There's nothing wrong with it because people do respond to the way you dress up, which is again one of the lines of Harvey Spector.
Right.
But ultimately, it's the work that will take you far.
Got it. Abhishek, can you tell us, so of course we were initially talking and you told us about a lot of your cases. Can you talk about one of those really bizarre cases that you've had to deal with and give the audience an idea of what sort of things you deal with?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to tell you the weirdest case that I've ever had. There was this client who had a pawn shop. Okay. And he really took his business seriously because he was a second generation pawn shop owner, which is great. He thought he can hire a pawn connoisseur
Okay.
at his shop.
Okay.
And what this pan connoisseur will do is, if there is a new customer who comes in, and there are, of course, he has 30, 40 different types of pan, which is chocolate pan to X pan to Rasgulla pan and all sorts of pans. But this pan connoisseur, you pay him 10, 20 bucks, he's going to taste it he'll take a small bite of the pan that you buy from the shop, and he's going to tell you whether it's good or not good. And then you take that jhoota pan and you ate it. So he wanted to patent or trade, I don't know what his plan was, because it was an idea that he came up with.
Okay.
And he said, I want to protect this pan connoisseur idea.
Wow.
I want to make sure that nobody else copies it. Now, again, it's really bizarre because, and you know, so I did not put him down. I said, okay, talk to me about how you came up with the idea. He said, you know, he took me back to Ramayana. He said, you know Ram and Shabri, right? You know Lord Ram and Shabri? I said, yeah. He said, so Lord Ram also took Shabri ke bed, jo jhoote the. And that's how he started, you know, justifying what is the logic behind hiring a pan connoisseur before you actually eat a pan.
Wow.
And I couldn't make sense out of it because it's kind of bizarre. It's not the way people generally eat pan, right? If I want a pan, I know what pan I want. It's a meetha pan. And again, he took it to another level. He said there is sada pan, meetha pan, and this brand he came up with was called jhoota pan. He said, I'm going to call it not meetha pan or khatta pan. I'm going to call it jhoota pan.
Wow.
So that was kind of odd, right? And we were obviously taken aback. We laughed it off also. And I legit asked him, like, have you tested it in the market? Have you actually, you know, had a pan connoisseur standing at the shop? And then later we found out that this pan connoisseur happens to be his cousin, who wanted a job and he wanted to just creatively sell some. So yeah, so a lot of bizarre people
That's a very creative idea, though.
I know, right?
Did you guys take it forward for him, or do you know what happened?
Yeah, so we did work initially. So we helped him to draft a bunch of contracts. He wanted some contracts with the landlord. He wanted to make sure that his suppliers are doing a bunch of things with him. So his raw material was sourced from a certain person who was very well known in a particular area. So we did those contracts. But there was not. It didn't really work out. This idea didn't really work out for him. And I said, why don't you test it? So he's like, no, first you protect it for me, then I'll test it. I said, okay. But ideas anyways cannot be protected, you know, under law. If you just have an idea, you cannot protect it. If you have an idea about, let's say, a book and you write a book, that's still okay. But this was just vague process that he came up with.
What if this guy were to come to you and he is like, here, take whatever money you need, just do it?
That's not how it works.
No?
We don't, I mean, I'm not the kind of lawyer who would only work for money. There has to be some merit to it. And I think I've been doing this for 17 years, right? So there is a certain merit that is attached to when I'm signing a certain document or the firm that I work.
It's your reputation
It's a reputation as well. So we don't want to, we've gone past that stage.
Got it.
I don't know, maybe some lawyer he would have found who would be okay with it, but I politely declined it. He still sends me those morning messages and sends me, you know, Hanuman Jayanti ka message or whatever. But I'm not actively representing him.
Okay, got it.
That was pretty bizarre, if you must know.
How much? I mean, I don't want you to reveal your charges, but how much do lawyers charge in general? Do lawyers charge? I've usually seen they charge by hour.
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
So, so in India, we've not really moved to a stage where you can charge by the hour.
Okay.
I think we still are at a place where, and charging by the hour, by the way, is a very foreign concept.
Okay.
Lawyers charging by the hour happens very regularly in the US and UK and everywhere else. In India, we usually go by a flat fee. In fact, believe it or not, the way our profession is built over the years, we are always taught to not focus on the monetary aspect of it. Contrary to what everybody thinks, that lawyers are money makers, money spinners, and you know, the moralistic angle or the professional ethic, one of the professional ethics that we were taught in the law school is to not focus on money. And only focus on serving the client, making sure that you don't say no to a client who comes to you, so on and so forth. So it's a very foreign concept, charging by the hour. Of late, yes, I've seen a lot of trend. I have also charged by the hour to a bunch of clients, but it's only either a certain mid-level company or a high-level company who don't have a concrete work for you, but they still want your opinion on something. Now, how do you? I have to charge them for the time that I'm spending, right? So in those cases, you bill them by the hour. But yeah, the numbers can can really go up depending on the nature of the lawyer,
Right.
depending on the experience level, depending on.
How much can a lawyer just starting out, finishing their degree and starting out, how much can they expect to make in India?
It's a very broad question.
Okay.
It depends on the area that you plan to
Okay.
practice. If you're a criminal lawyer, then your numbers can, again, if you're a good criminal lawyer, like
Okay.
you know, and usually I think when you do litigate, when you get into litigation, there is a common belief or a trend pretty much where people think that for the first 4-5 years you don't make any money. I kind of agree to it because you basically are a sponge. When you graduate, you're trying to soak up all the information. But once you have your feet wet, once you know enough about the tricks of the trade, once you know how to maneuver, before the judges, you know how it works. Once you've cracked that code, then there is no limit.
A number that you can add to this?
It's a very, I think even salaries these days in law firms are like 60-70K a month.
A month? That's just start.
That's just the start. And of course, I'm talking about at a very general level.
Right.
There are small and medium-sized firms. There are bigger firms who get paid more as
Right,
well.
because I know someone who just entered a very big law firm right after graduation, and they're making a 1.5 lakhs per month.
Oh yeah. So it depends on what law school you went to. If you went to the top tier law school like National Law School Bangalore, then you don't even have to worry. You're all set. Once you're in that factory, you are sure shot that your career is all set for a takeoff.
Right.
So depending on the law school you go to, depending on the area of law you practice in, depending on the company that you choose to work for, there are a lot of factors.
Interesting.
But it's getting much better. In fact, I was reading the other day that in litigation, earlier what used to happen was that the seniors were not paying their juniors at all.
Okay.
But of late there has been a trend, trend where even the seniors are okay to pay a certain amount, like a very basic amount of money to the juniors who come into their offices to, because ultimately they're spending time and everything. So things are changing, but I think if you're really good, then you can get started with 50, 60. It's not that bad.
Interesting. I want to get into a little bit of the whole side of what lawyers do, what I've seen in movies again.
Yeah.
No personal experience here. But when it comes to like criminal cases, right? Like for example, Jolly LLB is one of the most famous law-related movie in India, and in that the guy who's committed a crime, he's very rich, right? And the lawyer also has gotten the top lawyer, and the top lawyer is basically extending the case just so they can charge them more and more and more. Is that an actual thing that happens?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, yes. It's again, like I said, getting much better, but it does happen. I'll be lying if I say it doesn't happen. Sometimes for personal reasons, sometimes for I don't know, other reasons. But I think it does happen. Lawyers do have a tendency to keep billing the client because they know they've got somebody who they can milk. Who they can constantly milk. So it's not a practice that is very ideal. It's very unfortunate that it happens. But there at the same time there are other procedures that one can follow. Like if you feel a lawyer is really malpracticing or milking you, then of course there is a procedure you can follow to make sure that you complain against him and so on and so forth. But yeah, I'll be lying if I say it doesn't really happen. It does happen, unfortunately.
I want to get into like the moralities of being a lawyer also.
Okay.
So for example, let's take the 2611 case for example, right? I know you don't deal with criminal but
law,
I'm sure you would have some insights to it. The lawyer who was defending Kasab, right? Of course, that was a government-appointed lawyer, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. And but that Kasab was basically a terrorist for India, right? And an Indian having to defend a terrorist who's murdered so many people. What goes like? Can lawyers choose first of all if they want to defend someone or not? And second of all, I'm guessing they did it for the money, right?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think they did it for money. I think again this is something that we are taught in law school. It's a part of our profession. It's a part of our code of conduct or professional ethics. That if a person comes to you, then you should not say no to him for your personal benefit. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is, I think in this case especially, everybody. And our law is very well settled in this, that everybody has to have a fair trial. Everybody. It doesn't matter if it's a Kasab or if it's me or you or anybody. Anybody who's alleged to have done something wrong is not until and unless they're proven guilty, they're only alleged. So unless and until you give them a fair trial, unless and until the question and answers happen in the court, and unless and until the court decides that they have committed a wrong, you cannot say that he's a terrorist.
But I don't understand why such cases are dragged for so long when everything is on camera, everything is like out there, right? I know there are some cases where there are camera manipulations and something might seem like something but not actually. But in this case, it was pretty straightforward.
Correct.
Why that case extended for a pretty long time. But why does that happen?
I think what I'm trying to explain is basically that the process of a trial is something that is non-negotiable. Like you cannot. Of course, there are ways you can speed up the trial by setting up special courts and so on and so on, especially in cases where it's not a big deal, like a lok adalat or something. But what I'm trying to say is, in these cases, you have to be really careful that you consider, I mean, as a lawyer, as a judge, everybody, even the entire legal setup, even the police has a responsibility that each and every aspect of it is considered, well thought, well read, the law is applied to the facts of the particular case, and there is absolutely no iota of doubt. Then only, maybe a punishment is given. And especially if you're, let's say if it's a case which is this big, and maybe you can see that, it's going towards capital punishment and all that, you really have to make sure that the legal system is followed and, all the boxes are ticked. Even if you leave out a small iota of doubt, then you're not supposed to punish the person because his human rights come into the picture. And fine, what he's done, he has to pay for. But then he has to pay for if it is proven that he has done it, right? So for you and me, it might look on camera that, it's fine. But then maybe, so once you get into the details of the law, you'll understand that there are certain reasons why a person commits a crime. Sometimes it's an accident. I'm not saying this was an accident, but I'm saying there are so many aspects of a particular facts and circumstance that you have to follow. So I think the only reason why it takes so much time is to make sure that none of the boxes are unchecked. And we've given a fair trial to everybody, because anybody who comes into the system has a right to fair trial. So I think that's
especially because his life was also on the line. He was moving towards capital punishment.
So again, you don't have a preset notion. Like the judges don't know, or the lawyers obviously will ask for a capital punishment, because what the lawyers have asked for, the state has asked for, is capital punishment or some sort of severe form of punishment. It is the responsibility of the judicial system to make sure that all the boxes are checked. His life is going to be taken away for a long time or forever, right? So you can't really falter, or you can't be impatient with that.
Interesting.
And I understand the justice delayed is justice denied part of it, but some things, like, you have to follow the process in some cases.
Interesting.
That's what must have happened.
So I want to jump into the second segment for the podcast, which is legal or illegal. I'm going to give you certain cases. And you have to tell me whether it's legal or illegal. You can add a little bit of your explanation as well if you feel it's relevant. First question, everyone will have in their mind, is weed legal in India?
No, it's not. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody, but no, it's not legal in India. So there are two reasons why weed can be utilized. One is for recreational purposes, as a lot of people might want to try. The other is medicinal purposes, or for other similar reasons. It's not legal for recreational purposes. So you can't just use it for your recreational purposes, right? And there is, in fact, a law which is narcotics, substances, and so on and so forth, in 1985, that specifically says that it's only in case of medicinal purposes that you can use it, but for recreational, no, it's not. So
but bhang is legal.
Correct. So it's a naturally occurring substance. It's not really considered as and bhang is not weed, if I may say so, right? It's considered to be a very naturally available.
Comes from the same plant, but different ways
probably,
of sort of.
So
interesting.
That's how it is.
Okay. Second, is carrying alcohol in a car legal or illegal?
It is legal, but you have to be careful. So, under the Motor Vehicles Act, there are a few things you have to keep in mind. One is you cannot drive under the influence of alcohol. That's a given. That's a no-brainer. And of course, there are limits to it. And by the way, the police officers have the right to test you on a breath analyzer and so on and so forth. So that's a very done and dusted kind of a case. You can carry alcohol, but if you go through the law, you'll realize that it should not be carried at a place which is accessible by the driver or a passenger.
Okay.
So ideally, it should be in the trunk. It should be in the dicky, as we call it, right? The other thing is, if it is not in the trunk, and if it's, let's say, in your immediate possession, then it has to be not readily used. It has to be stored in such a manner that it's not, you cannot use it, you cannot access it. So maybe it's taped, maybe it's boxed, maybe it's tied up. That's okay. So carrying is not a problem, but the fact you're carrying it for immediate consumption, that's obviously a problem. And by the way, this is a very state-specific law.
Okay.
It's not a general law that so even states have certain limits to how much you can carry. Maharashtra will have something else. And if you're crossing borders, then you have to really be careful because they have a right to check. So generally, I think 1 to 2 liters is okay. And I'm generalizing it, not specific to a state. But anything beyond that, you really have to put it in the trunk and so on and so forth. So
and check with the state laws also.
And check with the state laws also. And then the police can obviously stop you to check and so on and so forth.
So my third question is, can cops just stop you on the road and check your car without any reason? So I'll give you a little more context to it. For example, there are a lot of breathalyzer checks that happen, or say traffic police is just standing and sort of checking for a motor vehicle if they're breaking signal and stuff. And in some cases, what happens is, in say breathalyzer cases where the person is caught, they'll sort of get them to the side and check the whole car, right? Or in the motor vehicle, like the traffic police case, sometimes they just snatch away the key.
Correct.
Right? Is all of that legal or illegal?
So if there is a reasonable doubt that a police officer has that, let's say you're driving under the influence of alcohol, and you can like, we all see those places around pubs, right? Usually the police is flocking the pubs because they know people will, drink and then eventually drive. If they have reasonable basis, reasonable reasons enough to suspect that you might be driving, so they can stop you. They have every right to do that. If there are enough reasons for them to suspect that you might be carrying it, they can of course ask you to park the car down. What they cannot do is they cannot be rude. They cannot, like if there is a woman passenger who's traveling with you, then they can't just like talk rudely and arrest you and so on and so forth. That's obvious, but they have every right to check it.
Okay.
In case of keys and all, I've heard recently that no, it's not correct for them to take away the keys. They have to disclose what are they stopping for, especially people with on bikes, because the key is easily available. They usually take off the key. That's not okay, because they have to tell the rider why are they stopping him. If it's a routine check, great, no problem. You can check the papers, the insurance, and so on and so forth. But let them go. But otherwise, it's not.
So
okay.
It's all up to the cop's discretion if they want to.
It is largely at the cop's discretion. But if you know your laws, if you are aware of, if you are confident that you're not doing anything, then so cops stop me all the time.
Right.
And I don't flash out my lawyer's card in the first instance because I want to know how it works. So sometimes they see that I have a big. I'm not carrying alcohol. But most of the time I have files, and my files are in big, cardboard boxes.
Okay.
So they feel I'm transporting something wrong or illegal, and they stop me all the time, and they're like, "Isme kya hai?" Okay, and I'm okay with it because
you have nothing to hide.
Yeah. And then they say, "Where are you coming from?" etc., etc. And I say, "I'm a lawyer." And then they say, "Okay, sir, thank you, all the best," and all.
So you get like an upper hand when you're a lawyer with.
I don't use it. I don't misuse it. I have never actually used it. I'm okay if I'm crossing a signal. I'm okay with paying a fine because I did cross a signal.
Right.
That's what I recommend to everybody. Don't jump a signal. It just take like 10 seconds or 30 seconds sometimes.
Right.
Don't take panga with the law, as we call it, right? Because the law is here to protect you. It's not here to poke you.
Right.
It's not here to bother you. If everybody understands that, I think we'll have a much better legal system.
Fourth question. Can a housing society refuse to rent out or sell a flat to unmarried couples or say gay or lesbian couples?
Okay, so there are two things. One is letting out, one is selling.
Okay.
So when it comes to selling, it is between the buyer and the seller.
Okay.
So it is definitely illegal if a seller says that I'm not going to sell it to somebody from the LGBTQ community.
It can't be based on their personal preference. If they personally prefer not to sell it to them, is it still illegal?
So no. So if they decide that I don't want to sell it to XYZ, that's okay. But if they're not selling it to you only because of that reason, which obviously they won't say, then it's okay because ultimately it's their property. In terms of letting out, what happens is, and it's prevalent in a few states, and I've been subjected to it, believe it or not. In Mumbai, when I was renting a house long time ago, They refused. They said, and I said, I'm married. They said, but you're not married in Mumbai. And I said, well, how does it, I'm married in India. He's like, no. How do we know that you're not going to have an alternate partner in Mumbai? And I was amazed by the approach and the soch that they generally had. I said, look, I cannot get my wife here or my son here, but it's up to you. And it was bothering me. So I did complain to the society and I said, you cannot do this. I'm a lawyer. And that's when I flashed my lawyer card. I said, I'm a lawyer. You're in for trouble if you do this. And then they eventually said, okay, give us documents of your wife and son, and eventually it worked out. But if they refuse to let out to you, and by they, I mean the society.
Okay.
If the landlord, if he's not okay with letting out to you, that's okay. It's kind of his property.
Okay.
Right? So he can freely decide.
So the owner can decide if they want to let it out or not, but the society cannot decide.
Yeah. Society cannot stop you just because you're unmarried. So it's definitely illegal if you are stopped from letting out your property to an unmarried person or a single or a couple also, like two friends. It can be two friends also, right? Again, there was a case where a brother and sister were trying to take a flat. The society refused. They said, how do we know that you're brothers and sisters? That's stupid. That's really stupid. So in those cases, I think it's illegal. But if it's between the landlord and the tenant, if the landlord owns the property, he has every right to decide who he wants to let out to. Usually, in my experience, the landlords are okay. It's only the society and the neighbors who have a major problem, in letting out. So, but it's definitely illegal if the society doesn't let you rent out a place to an unmarried person, then it's definitely illegal.
Awesome. Okay. Last one. Is it legal to vape in public? Or is it legal to own a vape?
It's illegal to vape in public. You cannot vape in public. It's like smoking in public place.
Kids, are you listening? Don't vape. Okay.
Yeah, so you can't vape in public. It's pretty much like smoking. So e-cigarettes recently have been banned as well. So it can be subjected to fine, and if a policeman sees you, he can fine you, and so on and so forth. So it's definitely not okay, and it's illegal.
It's illegal to use in public, but can you own it?
That's a great question. I think for personal use, you can own it probably, but not for public.
Right. You can't be distributing or selling.
You can't be distributing or selling.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Awesome. That was a great segment. Let's get back to what we were talking about. You're an IP lawyer. The main distinguishment or the main confusion among people is the difference between trademark, copyright, and patent.
Yeah.
Can you please clarify it?
Absolutely. That's what I do for a bread and butter. That's what most of my time is spent on. Okay. So if you have created something which is like a brand name, let's say your brand is Barely Opinionated, right? The name or the logo of Barely Opinionated is something that you trademark. Why? Because it is your identifier. Okay. This is how your brand is known. This is how your business or product is known. So if you're selling a product, let's say Apple, the word Apple used for computers is a name, is the identity of the product, right?
Interesting.
So you got to trademark it.
So Apple is a great example that you're taking, because Apple is also a fruit. And
correct. So the law says that if you have a name which you are using, so the name that you have can be an invented word. It can be a name that has no meaning whatsoever. Like Google, I don't know what it means. I don't think Xerox has a meaning. There was a recent trademark client that we counseled. His brand was Flabooza. Flabooza for t-shirts didn't have any meaning. So that's one level of it. The other is if you take an existing dictionary word and apply it to something totally different. Is that okay or not okay? That's absolutely okay. So the law says that it should not be describing what the services are. So if you have a brand which is, let's say Boots Bazaar, or let's say the shoe shop. I recently saw somewhere the shoe shop. It's not okay because you're describing, or pretty much it's a generic brand name, right? There was a gym that I used to go to long time ago called The Gym. Obviously, I stopped going there, not for this purpose. But The Gym was a really bad example, like absolutely zero creativity involved, right? So those are not okay. But if you have a name like Apple, if you're applying it to a very different products or services, that's okay. So if you have a Rabbit, Rabbit is a brand for t-shirts, that's okay. Because Rabbit doesn't really describe, it's not made of rabbit fur, or it's not like if you wear the t-shirt, you'll start hopping or something. It's not describing anything at all. It's basically a name that you want to use your products for, right? So that's still okay.
Got it.
So if you have a name or if you have a logo, or if you have a slogan, or if you have, let's say, a color combination, that is a trademark.
Okay.
Okay, because it's a trademark. It's a mark used in your trade.
Okay.
Correct? So that's a trademark. Copyright is given for artistic works.
Okay.
It protects your literature. If, let's say, I write a poem on how to record the best podcast in the world. Now, that is something that I've created out of my own intellect. It's a literary work that I've created. Or let's say an artistic work. Let's say I draw a painting of you, right? Of you and me sitting together and how this whole thing works out. That painting is a subject matter of copyright. So artistic work, literary work, dramatic work, musical, your songs, your music compositions, right? Your lyrics of a particular song, your cinematographic films, right? Your movies that you make, they are all subject matter of copyright protection. So that's copyrights. The third thing usually is patents.
Right.
Patents are given for inventions,
Okay.
not discoveries. If you discovered that there is a star, no, that's not. I see a lot of people naming stars on their name, and cool, that's a cool thing to do, but you don't own the star. Okay, because you've discovered something. If you create something, if you invent something, and if it is new, and let's say it's useful, and it's not very obvious also. It's not like you took the red wire in place of yellow wire and you fixed yellow wire in place of red wire. You just merely rearranging stuff.
Right.
That's not an invention. But if you genuinely invented something like a flying car,
Right.
okay, let's say a mobile phone, let's say a digital camera, a laptop. And back in the day, it was an invention, right?
Right.
So those are things which you have invented. They were not existing anywhere in the world.
Okay.
Those are patentable.
Okay.
Then you can file a patent on it.
Got it.
So trademarks, copyrights, patents. There's also something known as designs.
Right.
Designs is basically something which is aesthetic to the eye. So for example, if I have a bottle of water.
Wouldn't that fall under artistic work?
Yeah, but there is a separate category of intellectual property that protects design. So when I say design, I don't mean a 2D.
Okay.
What I mean is let's say a physical
A
product.
product design, a physical
a product design. So let's say there is a water bottle which is in the shape of, let's say, Qutub Minar. Okay, or like an Eiffel Tower.
Right.
And you can twist the Qutub Minar ka top, and then that's how you drink. I'm not inventing the bottle. I'm just making the bottle look cool.
Right.
Right. I was again sorry for the candid example here, but I saw a pillow which was very provocative, and it felt like as if you're hugging a woman and sleeping, right? And your head is on her chest.
I think that's a great invention for lonely people.
Possible. That's a great product design. It's a pillow. You're not reinventing the concept of a pillow. You're just making it look wow. And obviously, I'm not sure if they're selling more. Maybe they will. but that's a design. Right. So patents protects inventions, copyrights protects artistic work, literary work, dramatic work, cinematographic films. Trademarks protects your brand names, your logos, your slogans, your color combination, even the sounds. I forgot to mention that. Even a particular sound,
Okay.
like your Britannia,
Okay.
ting, ting, ding,
Ooh.
right? The minute you hear that sound, you're like, "Arey, ye
Britannia.
Or let's say Airtel. You remember back in the day there was a jingle.
Of course.
The Airtel jingle, right?
Of course.
So that can be protected as a trademark because it becomes an identifier with that particular business.
Got it.
And last is the design that I just
Okay. So keeping this in consideration, right now there's a lot of online content, social media content that everyone makes, right?
Yeah.
Any Tom, Dick and Harry can
Yeah.
make social media
Yeah.
content. But what happens is, say for example, we have to put an image or we have to put a video. We just directly pick it off the internet.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Google,
yes.
picking off images from Google,
Yeah.
picking off content from XYZ website, video from XYZ YouTube video.
Yeah.
Is that legal?
No, please, no, don't do it. Stop doing that. A lot of my time is again spent on a daily basis educating content creators to not do it.
Okay.
So you cannot take off somebody's image from Google and say whatever, right? That's illegal, okay? Even if you give them credit, that's not okay. That's the second question that I get. But I gave him credit. No, that's not wrong. That's not correct. That's still wrong. You can use certain license-free images.
Okay.
Okay, if you're using somebody's image, you have to license it first of all or buy it. There are certain, and Google allows you. I think if you just Google license-free images on Google, you can use certain images which are licensed, for which you don't have to pay a royalty or any charge to use that image. That you can still use. But if you and I, let's say, take a picture and post it on the internet, any XYZ cannot just copy it and use it in their videos or.
So if I'm putting an Instagram photo and if someone else takes it and does something with it, that's not legal?
That's not legal at all. he's violating your copyright. So the first thing
So copyright, you don't have to do like a submission or a registration for to get copyright?
That's another great question. So copyright in India is automatic. Okay. The minute the work gets created, you have a right to claim your copyright on it. However, if you file a copyright application to it, or if you register the copyright in your name, it's easy to prove who owns it. It's like if you're in this room and you say, this is my room, nobody can question it until you have to show your documents. What is the proof that you own it, right? So then you pop out your sale deed of the place and say, yeah, this is my house. Similarly for copyrights, if you have a registration certificate and if you say this is the concrete proof that I'm the owner of this copyrightable image or whatever the subject matter is, that's a good enough proof. But otherwise, you don't have to register the copyright. The minute any work is created, it becomes your copyright. That's why everywhere I go, I tell creators and content creators to have a copyright notice at the bottom. It says C in a circle.
Okay.
And the year that the work was created. So C in a circle, 2023.
Okay.
And then you mention your name, let's say Abhishek Sharma or Rohit Agrawal, and then you say all rights reserved. So that's a copyright notice.
I've seen that a lot, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a copyright notice you got to give to let the world know that you're claiming copyright on it, and it's your copyright, and they should not, all rights reserved, they should not do anything about it.
If I were to take like an image or say a video or a music piece online, and I were to tweak it,
yeah,
would that then count as, say, because I've taken a piece of content, I've tweaked it in my way, it's not the original piece anymore, does that still count?
So, Rohit, it depends on, so you really have to compare the works.
Okay.
There is no litmus test or a thumb rule where I can say infringement or not infringement. When you say tweak it, let's say you're making a 60-minute video. If the work that you're using from the other person is, let's say, for 3 seconds or for 1 second, that's still okay. Why? Because it's considered under a concept called fair use. You're not really violating his copyright. Let's say you're commenting on a movie. Let's say you're recording a reaction video and you're showing a scene or you're showing a particular only a small portion of it. That's okay. Okay. Or let's say the purpose of your video is to educate the world in general. Then it's okay. But then you cannot. So you have to compare the works to decide if it's infringement or not infringement. There is no litmus test.
That's interesting.
As such.
I think this is going to be a very important segment for all content creators, potential content creators.
I hope so. Yeah.
Has there been any case where you were forced to sort of take up that case and just had to deal with it? Because I know you get to choose, right?
Yeah.
What cases you want to take up, what you don't.
Yeah.
But have there been situations where you were just forced to take up cases and you had to just deal with it? Does that happen a lot for lawyers?
Not really. Not especially in the kind of practice that I have. I think the only reason why we force ourselves to take up a particular case is because we want to help the guy.
Right.
So in our firm, again, there is a good 5 to 10% of the cases that we take is only because we really want to help the guy. So we really believe that the content that this guy is making, or let's say the invention that this guy has, or let's say the business that this guy has started is really nice and genuine. He's really making a lot of efforts. So we waive off our legal fees. But so far we've not been able to, not really had the case where we are forced to take up a particular. We force ourselves to waive off the charges, and I think that's also a part of being a lawyer. We do a lot of work pro bono, which means you don't really charge for.
Is that from the government, or do you just do it for goodwill?
So I do it for goodwill. I honestly do it for the goodwill. Nobody's forcing us to do that. We do it for
don't lawyers by law have some number of cases, or say some number of hours that they need to spend pro bono?
No. So unfortunately, we don't have a system where you have to do it.
Okay.
It's encouraged.
Okay.
And it's recommended. It's strongly recommended. So, lawyers have a lot of moral responsibility and social responsibility to help the needy, help the poor, and make sure that everybody has access to the justice system. So on our own, what we do is we enroll ourselves with the local legal aid committees. So legal aid is basically where a person who cannot afford to pay a lawyer, he can come to a legal aid committee or society, and then the society or the committee will provide a lawyer to you. And we enroll ourselves with that society. So if a case comes to us, we don't really charge. We're not supposed to charge any money. But yeah, that's what we do on a general basis. That nobody forces you to take a case. We just go by on a case-to-case basis, and if it has enough merit, and it's really not about money. I think after a certain point of time, that's what my learning has been in the profession. You really stop worrying about the money. And I know you need to survive and you need to do all sorts of things, but I ultimately don't we all want to sleep better? Don't we all want to like make some? Don't you like? I feel very happy when an elderly client of mine, he says thank you and he gives me a smile and he gives me a small hug, and he says thank you, beta. That's all I'm working for. So beyond a certain point of time, it's the money doesn't really should not matter.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how it is.
Interesting. What has been one of your, like you spoke about the Pan case.
Yeah.
What have you had any other cases like that?
There's
one case we were talking
about.
If you'd like to talk about it.
Okay, I'll talk about it. There were actually two that pop up in my mind right now. There was this model who thought she was a model, and more power to her. Who am I to judge? But she thought she was a model, and she got her portfolio done, and almost all the pictures that she shot were nude pictures. And she said she somehow found us on the internet, again Mumbai. She Googled me or something, and then she called me and says, I want to meet you and blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, come to the office. And we did our counseling and she paid for it, etc., etc. Basically, she ended up showing me the portfolio with more than 35 pictures which were nude. And not, so for her, it's art. The way they were shot was not nude, was not art for me. They were basically kind of provocative, and they were not something that anybody would like to publish or anybody would like to even see, for that matter. But she was really particular, and then she was after my life to help me copyright it and monetize it and so on and so forth. And while there is no legally, if I may say, there is no law which says that you cannot copyright a nude picture or something.
At the end of the day, it's artistic work, no?
Correct. But then what happens is, you cannot distribute it. The problem is the distribution and the publication of such. So she's going to put it somewhere. She's going to distribute it to somebody. That obviously is a problem. But otherwise also she was quite weird.
But would that impact? So for example, that lady came to you, she wanted to copyright a picture.
Yeah.
You could have copyrighted it without caring about
it. But then if it was just about the copyright, then it was okay. The whole conversation, the way it went through, she was trying to get personal and she was trying to
okay.
I felt very odd. It was not a clear-cut case of art being copyrighted. It was really weird, and I chose not to get into trouble. And then she had a payment plan for us. She said every picture that I monetize, you get a certain percentage of it, and some complicated formula. It was all too much for us, honestly. And if it was genuine art, then of course, yes, more power to everybody. I obviously work for artists for the last 17 years, so I'm absolutely okay with it. But she was in a very different zone, so I had to politely let her go and decline, and I don't know where she is right now. That's what.
So another thing that we have noticed in India's judiciary system is nepotism, right?
Okay.
There are usually second generation of lawyers, third generation of lawyers.
Okay.
A lot of judges, even the CJI, if I'm not wrong, the Chief Justice of India is a second generation judge.
Yeah.
So is there nepotism in this industry? How does it work?
That's a great question. See, I'm a second generation lawyer.
Oh.
My dad was a lawyer.
Okay.
My mom is still a lawyer. My brother is a lawyer.
Wow.
So I shouldn't be talking about
them. You're a family of lawyers.
We are a family of lawyers.
Okay.
But here's my 2 cents to it. And I'll give you my personal example. When I was in law school, I don't remember having a legal conversation with my dad because he was too busy. Because the profession takes up all your time. I think as a son or as a daughter, if you join your, let's say, dad's practice or mom's practice, the learning happens only when you join the practice and maybe a few years later.
Right.
The only thing that I remember from my communication, my discussions with my dad was, he said you should spend some time in the library, and you should always read articles and judgments to keep yourself abreast of, all the things that are happening. And he recommended a couple of libraries to me. One was Indian Law Institute back in the day, just opposite the Supreme Court, and the other one was his own district court's library. I don't remember any other conversation that I had with my father regarding. He never sat me down and said, listen, this is how tenancy works, this is how. So it doesn't happen like that.
But what about, so for example, if you're a second generation lawyer, your father would have come up in the industry, he would have made his connections, that would have then helped you, right? I mean, that's how typical nepotism, if you look at Bollywood nepotism, that's the main thing, right? That's the main argument.
Yeah, I think it helps to a very little extent in the field of law. Yes, connections, yes. So if you have a surname, then people know that you're from the same family. But ultimately what you do in the court, ultimately, if you don't draft your document properly, ultimately the deed that you have drafted is really bad. It's not going to take you any far. If you are arguing before a judge, and yeah, maybe they know that you belong to a famous surname and blah, blah, blah. It happened with me as well. I was arguing before a judge who I think knew that I am from a certain family background, and nothing really happened. If my arguments were good, I won the case, and they were, so I won the case. But otherwise, there have been cases where I fumble. And the judge is harsh on you. The judge say, get out or whatever, right? So it can only take you a little far, I think. It does help. I think in any profession it helps, right?
Yeah.
If you're a businessman also, it kind of helps.
Correct.
But then ultimately, if you're not sitting on your galla or your shop on a daily basis, and you're not really building that connect with the customers, you're not going to be able to sustain that shop for too long.
Right.
So I think it only helps to a little extent. Ultimately, what kind of a lawyer you are, what kind of learnings you've had in law schools, and how you practice, how you conduct yourself in the profession is what matters. And I think hats off to our existing Honorable Chief Justice. The way he conducts, I've read his judgments. I've been fortunate to see his live proceedings now because they're available online. Brilliant. We are blessed to have a Chief Justice like him because, and it's not because of the surname that he has, it's because of the work that he does. I mean, I recommend people to go through some of his judgments if they can. Brilliant.
I don't know if you can talk about it, but there were a lot of controversies with the previous Chief Justice of India, right? In terms of the controversial judgments that he was giving out. Again, I'm not too sure of the specifics, but I've read here and there, right? He seemed to be favoring the government, right? Is that something that you have an opinion on? Is that something that
I don't have an opinion on that. My way of looking things as a lawyer is slightly different. Maybe not. I'm not really aware of it. I'm not the best person to comment on it.
So, what can someone expect in the 5 years of, say, starting their law journey? Right. What is the education like, and what do the 5 years or 10 years look like for them?
It's comprehensive. It's exhausting. You need to understand that this is a serious profession. It's not a profession which is a backup. And I see people who are doing, CS plus law. All due respect, I disagree with that. If you want to be a CS, be a CS. If you want to be a lawyer, be a lawyer.
But don't colleges offer those degrees, CS plus LLB or CA plus LLB?
No, not CS plus LLB. I think what they offer is BA LLB honors, or BSc LLB.
Right.
Now, what happens is that's a 5-year law course. And what they're trying to achieve in that 5-year, and I also did a BA LLB honors. So in the first couple of years, we study the social subjects like sociology. We studied history of the legal system, and so on and so forth, which is important to lay the foundation of what's coming next. So imagine if I'm learning about the society and I don't know how the system, the social system works. So I'm talking one level above from the physics that we have, civics that we have studied, right? Civics is all basic, gram, panchayat and all that. But here we study the history of courts.
Right.
Like what are the legal maxims? What is the meaning of a particular, why do we have a judicial system which is what we have, right? So to understand that, you need a background. That is what you study in the initial part of 5 years law. In the later parts, you obviously go through your criminal procedure, your civil procedure, your IPC and so on and so forth. So that's a different thing, but if this is not a backup degree, right? It's really difficult for you to do 2 professional degrees at the same time, and I somehow looked down on it.
I'm guessing studying CA and LLB at the same time studying CA in itself is a big deal. Studying LLB in itself is a big deal. Studying both of them together will be a pain.
A lot of people do that, believe it or not, Rohit. But here's what I would suggest: if you want to be a lawyer. Then the preparation starts from somewhere around, if you're doing a 5-year law course, then somewhere in your 11th or let's say early part of 12th. You should really put some heart and mind into why you want to be a lawyer. One reason could be that your dad is a lawyer, your mom is a lawyer. Fine, you get some access to legal system. You get access to understanding what it takes to be a lawyer. But the other thing is why do you want to be a lawyer? See, you may understand why your dad is a lawyer, but that's separate. He's done and dusted. Why do you want to? What's your calling? Do you like the Harvey Spector side of it? or do you like the grind of it? Do you like to help people when they come back to you with happy tears, or you're in it for money? What's your calling? What's your reason?
Right.
You have to sort that out first. Then you have to be ready to commit. Don't drop out. I mean, of course, you can drop out, but what I'm trying to say is, you're in it for the longer run.
You can't change your profession in between.
You can, but then it's difficult for, like, if you don't commit to it, you're not going to be a good lawyer.
Right.
You know, you really you'll be failing at most of the cases that you're doing, or you're not going to be able to make it, as we call it, right? Be ready to learn for the rest of your life. Be ready to study new laws, new articles, new judgments. Be ready to have a patience level. You know, one thing that I realized the other day, I was speaking to my friend and he said, "Arey, you talk so much, you're a lawyer." I said, "No, being a lawyer is not talking. Being a lawyer is listening." And when to talk is the question. You know, the gist is when to talk, and we get paid to talk, right? So why waste it, right? So listening is the key. So, you know, profession, you have to really have your reasons to do it, and once you're in it, you commit to it. You should be ready to study for the rest of your life, and I think that's when you can probably make up a good career of yourself.
Interesting. Awesome. Thank you so much, Abhishek.
Thank you.